Hey, it's Tali, here to tell you about the podcast Israel Story. Now, more than ever, Israel is a tough topic. Some love it, others hate it, but Israel Story offers a nuanced, faithful window into the extraordinary stories of everyday people in Israel. Beautiful and ugly, tragic and inspiring, ridiculous and heartwarming. Check out hundreds of timeless episodes in their back catalog or dive into the 65 Wartime Diaries episodes capturing slivers of life right now. Hear voices from soldiers to survivors, farmers to rabbis, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and connect with this complicated, amazing place. Hosted by Mishi Harman and produced with the Jerusalem Foundation and the Times of Israel, find Israel Story wherever you get your podcasts.
In need of a good read or just want to keep up with the books everyone's talking about? NPR's Book of the Day podcast gives you today's very best writing in a pocket-sized show. Whether you're looking to engage with the big questions of our times or temporarily escape from them, we've got an author who'll speak to you. Catch today's great books in 15 minutes or less on the Book of the Day podcast, only from NPR.
Welcome to the 5 Books, where each week we talk with a Jewish author about 5 books that are near and dear to them. My name is Tali Rosenblatt-Cohen, and today I'll be talking with Jill Santopolo about her new novel, The Love We Found.
Initially, I was not planning to write a sequel to The Light We Lost. One of my very first readers was my sister, Allie. And after she had read the manuscript, she said to me, "Hey, before you go, could you just let me know what happens next?" I said, "Well, it's a story. It ended. Like, that's where it ends." And she looked at me for a second and she was like, "I call BS. You made up that story so you can make up what happens next. So just sit down and make it up and then you can go home."
Jill Santopolo is the internationally best-selling author of Stars in an Italian Sky, Everything After, More Than Words, and The Light We Lost, which was a Reese Witherspoon Book Club pick and has been optioned for film. Her books have been translated into more than 35 languages and have been named to the New York Times, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, Apple, and IndieBound bestseller lists. She's also the publisher of Philomel, an imprint of Penguin Young Readers Group, where she edits many critically acclaimed, award-winning, and best-selling books. She lives in Washington, D.C. and New York with her husband and daughter. In this episode, we talk about how reading Exodus by Leon Uris brought her a deeper understanding of Israel.
I had learned facts about the founding of Israel in Hebrew school, but I had never really felt it in the way that fiction can make you feel it. What it really took to restart a nation 2,000 years after its demise.
We'll also discuss how Jill found the voice for The Light We Lost.
I started writing that way for The Light We Lost because I had gone through a breakup and I kept thinking oh, I have to tell him about this. Oh, he would really love this. Oh, I wonder what he would think about this. And I wanted to sort of capture that feeling of being so connected to someone that they have infiltrated your inner monologue.
All that and more coming up next. Welcome to the 5 Books, Jill.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. You have written a number of books, many books for adults, books for children, books for young adults. Your books have connected with readers in such a remarkable way, in an unusual way. And I think you just write with so much clarity and compassion about the ways that our choices, especially in terms of love and identity, really shape who we become. And the fact that your books connect with audiences the way that they do, I think is really a testament to how relatable and how insightfully drawn your characters are, just full of truths about relationship and timing and the paths that we do or don't take. So I wanted to ask you about this. You just published The Love We Found, which is the sequel to, I think, which was your first book that you published for adults, The Light We Lost. And what was it that made you think that you needed to write a sequel, or did you always know that there was a sequel there?
That's a great question. And first, thank you so much for your really kind words about my writing. It's just always so meaningful to hear that from people who have read stories, because I feel like I set out to write books essentially so people would feel less alone in their decisions and in their sorrows and in their grief. And when I hear that my books have touched someone, it means really a lot to me. So thank you for that, to start with. And as far as The Love We Found, so initially I was not planning to write a sequel to The Light We Lost. The Light We Lost was its own complete story, and it had a beginning and a middle and an end, and I was happy with it. But I had a feeling starting from very early on that readers might be interested in a sequel, because one of my very first readers was my sister Allie. And after she had read the manuscript, I went over to babysit her daughter, who at the time was 3 years old or 2 years old. She was little. And when Allie came home, she said to me, "Hey, before you go, could you just let me know what happens next?" And I said, "What do you mean what happens next?" And she said, "Well, with that manuscript you gave me, the one about Lucy and Gabe, like what happens next?" And I said, "Oh, nothing." She was like, "What do you mean nothing?" I said, "Well, it's a story. It ended. Like that's where it ends." And she looked at me for a second and she was like, "I call BS. You made up that story so you can make up what happens next. So just sit down and make it up and then you can go home." So I made up a few facts for her at that point. And that was sort of the first time I was like, people might want to know what happens next. Like I left this at such a cliffhangery moment that there may be questions. And then over the years, I kept getting a lot of DMs and a lot of emails, and people coming up to me at book signings sort of saying like, "So I just need to know, like, what happens with Lucy's marriage? I need to know what happens with her son, or could you just tell me she got back to New York and then what happened?" So I sort of saved in my head, like all of the questions, the list that everyone kept asking me. And at some point, I brought it up a couple of times with my editor. And at one point she was like, "Okay, I think this is the time. I think you should write the sequel." And I went through, and for the first draft, I essentially just like, it was a report on Lucy. I like answered the questions that everybody had asked me, because I figured if I was writing the sequel, I wanted it to be the sequel that answered the questions people had. I didn't want people to leave the sequel and be like, "Well, I still have no idea what went on." So that was sort of my first draft, was like, here's all the answers, and now let me actually make this into a story. And that's sort of how the sequel was born. So it's essentially thanks to my sister and a lot of readers who wrote in wanting more.
It's great to know that we all can impact what happens next in the lives of the characters we love.
Book 1, A Jewish Book from Childhood, Exodus by Leon Uris.
So I am what my sisters and I refer to as a pizza bagel. So my mom's family is Jewish, mainly from Belarus and Austria. And my dad's family is Italian and Irish. So I'm very much a mix, but Jewish religion is matrilineal. So my sisters and I, we always say, are Jewish enough to marry anyone. And we all were raised in a Reform synagogue. We all had bat mitzvahs and celebrating all of the holidays. And I found that it was really meaningful to me to sort of read about a lot of the history of Jewish people, and not only learn about it in Hebrew school, but also learn about it through stories that were fictional or based on fact, but actually, fabricated so that all of the details that you might want to know were there. And I had, when I was probably like 4th and 5th grade, an entire shelf of my bookcase was essentially Jewish historical fiction. Like everything from All of a Kind Family, Lydia Queen of Palestine, When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit, Number of the Stars, like truly, like it was a full collection for me. And I was realizing recently, I still have a historical fiction section of my bookshelf that is a lot of World War II and surrounding stories. And even when I wrote Stars in an Italian Sky, which is based a lot on the Italian part of my heritage, and also my husband is half Italian and half Jewish too. So we got a whole bunch of pizza bagels in our family. I knew that when I wanted to set it right after World War II, I needed to have the story of Jewish Italians as well in there. So it's been something that I have read about and thought about since I was in 4th grade.
Yeah, that's quite young to have a directed interest in your Jewish roots. And I love some of those books you mentioned, and also recognize that it was pretty limited of a bookshelf at that time, just the books that were available to Jewish kids. There's so much of a broader bookshelf now, I think that's available.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So tell me when you read Exodus.
So I read Exodus, I want to say in 9th grade. I think I first had read actually Mila 18 because I was really into Holocaust literature at that point. And then I was looking at what else Leon Uris had written because I thought that was a really interesting story, which is the uprising of the Warsaw Ghetto is in Mila 18. So I saw that he had also written Exodus. I had not realized at that point in time that Exodus was this like seminal novel about the creation of Israel. I just thought like, oh, I liked Mila 18. I'm going to also read Exodus. And when I read it, I had learned facts about the founding of Israel in Hebrew school, but I had never like really felt it in the way that fiction can make you feel it. And I came away from that book with just so much more of a connection to Israel and a desire to visit it. And I feel like it really kind of shifted my feelings about what it really took to restart a nation like 2,000 years after its demise, and how much of a remarkable feat that was.
I mean, it is such a seminal book. For those who don't know the story, can you give us like a 2-sentence synopsis of Exodus?
So it's essentially goes from being a displaced Jewish person after World War II, trying to get to British Mandate Palestine, and tells the story of a bunch of different people as the nation is founded. Some people who were born in Israel, some people who were born in America, how everybody kind of comes together.
The way that you're describing its impact on you was so much of the impact that it had on so many American Jews. It really, credited with changing people's perceptions of Israel. Certainly in Soviet Jewry was credited with creating a strain of Zionism there that led to so many Soviet Jews wanting to move to Israel. And also the hero of the story, Ari Ben Canaan, was like a type of Jewish hero that we really hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
So I wonder, you write these sweeping sagas, so I wonder if that's a thread that felt relevant to you.
Yeah, I think there's something about books like Exodus where it covers a long period of time that I found really appealing. And the idea of following characters through a lot of different trials and challenges in their lives, and how the external world puts in some of those challenges, and then how internally there are some of those challenges. I feel like, The Light We Lost, my novel, it takes place over the course of 13 years, and there's a lot of external societal issues that push the characters in different directions. And then some of it then becomes, internal pieces that are pushing people around as well. But even that book ends in Israel. And that was something that I was looking at the time for where would Gabe, my journalist, like what would he be covering at that in like 2013 and 2014. And the earlier Gaza war was one of my choices. And I said, I want to set that there. And I got to go on a research trip to Israel to sort of figure out where my characters were going to go, where they were going to live, what the hospital was like, and all of that, which was a really cool bonus to deciding to set part of my book there.
Yeah, and I was curious about that and what made you want to have that very critical plot element happen there.
I feel like part of what I like to do in my books is call attention to various things. And by including them in a story, it becomes less of a news piece and more like you can see how things affect people. I made some choices about what I was going to include. And, the book starts on September 11th, for example. So for a lot of readers now who were born after September 11th or were too young to really remember September 11th, I wanted that to be not just a fact in a history book, but like, here's how it affected real people. Even though my people are fictional, the sort of emotionality of it, I hope, feels real. I think that the sort of conflict in Israel at the time, that has been a conflict in Israel since before its founding, since the days of Exodus, I wanted that to sort of shine a little spotlight on that, to say, here's a thing that's happening in the world, and it's not just a line of news. Like, here's how it has affected real people.
Yeah, it's something I really appreciate in your novels. I wonder if you were to reread Exodus now, if you think it would resonate differently.
I bet it would. I mean, I think even just being an older person with more experience of life and more understanding of the world, I think everything resonates slightly differently. You know, when I was in grad school, I got an MFA in actually writing for children and young adults, which isn't what I'm doing right now, but I read a whole bunch of novels that I had read when I was 8 or 9 or 10 or 11, again, when I was 25 or 30 or whatever, however old I was. And there were so many things that I saw with the extra decade or so of experience, 2 decades of experience in my life, that I thought, oh, wow, this is more meaningful, or this was so powerful to me back then and now it's not, or, you know, whatever it is. So I think that, you know, reading anything when you yourself are a slightly different person, and we're all changing always, you know, you take different pieces from it. And I also feel that way about writing, to be honest. Like, if I had tried to write The Light We Lost now, 10 years after I originally wrote it, it probably would be a different book, you know? And had I tried to write the sequel earlier, it probably would have been a different book. So yeah. I feel like there's just so much about what you take creatively from work as a reader and as a writer based on your own life experience.
Yeah. You also work as a publisher of children's books, so you spend a lot of time with other people's books, with your own books, with children's books. Were you always a big reader and writer as a kid?
I was. I was really lucky because my mom was an elementary school teacher. She's retired now, but she was a reading specialist and always encouraged reading. She always read to me and encouraged writing too. And my very first story that I wrote, I guess you could say, I was 3 years old and I told my mom a story and she was like, well, let's write it down. And we wrote it down, or she wrote it down, and she gave me markers to do the illustrations, and then she took it to school and laminated it. And I still have this story that I wrote, the first story I ever wrote when I was 3 years old. And she was really encouraging throughout my whole life to keep telling stories and writing them down, or creating them, you know, creating artwork for them if I wanted to. Or actually, I ended up handing it off to some friends in first grade who were better artists than I was. And I was like, listen, I'm going to do the words, but I need you to do the pictures because you're better. So maybe I was always an editor at heart.
Look, it's a tough task to approach big questions with humility and a bit of humor. So if you're looking for a companion to the 5 books, you should also check out No Small Endeavor, the award-winning podcast from our friends at Great Feeling Studios and PRX. Hosted by Professor Lee C. Camp, the No Small Endeavor podcast thoughtfully merges the world of theology with arts, society, and politics to ask the question, how can we live a good life while nourishing the soul? That answer and insight is provided by a stellar lineup of guests, including The Office actor Rainn Wilson, Revisionist History's Malcolm Gladwell, and a wide range of writers, thinkers, and philosophers. If you're looking for a place to start, check out their episode with Rabbi Shai Held, author of the book Judaism is About Love, Recovering the Heart of Jewish Life, about engaging the messiness and joy of life with honesty. You can find No Small Endeavor on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What's causing the rise in book banning? On my podcast, Velshi Banned Book Club, I speak with authors of banned books to try and find out.
I think what they're really objecting to is that a young person has perceived the hypocrisy and corruption of the generation that has created their world.
This book saved me in a lot of ways, and then I published it hoping to help people find a blueprint to heal.
Season 2 of Velshi Banned Book Club. All episodes available now.
Book 2, A Jewish Book from Adulthood, Acts of Faith by Eric Siegel.
So that book starts in New York City. There's an Orthodox Jewish community and a Catholic community that are near each other. And it talks about the way the characters kind of interact and as they get older, sort of what happens between them and how they change and their worlds change and what that sort of means. And I think it was a book that I was really fascinated by because of the pizza bagelness of my family, and how there are these crossovers, these spaces where the religions kind of match up in a way, and that friendship and love and family can happen across religion and across cultures. And I think that was really important to me too, especially coming from an interfaith, intercultural marriage.
I haven't read it, but what I understand is that the characters are not just like a Jewish character and a Catholic character. Like one is about to be a rabbi, and the Catholic way he's studying to be a priest.
Priest, yeah. He is.
So they're really very rooted in their belief system. And I wonder if that sort of tension between tradition and like personal desire, if that meant something to you then.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, and one of the characters, so there's the two male characters that you just mentioned, Daniel and Timothy, I think were their names. And then there's Deborah, who's Daniel's sister. And she starts out modern Orthodox. I think they're modern Orthodox, or maybe they're even more Orthodox than modern. But ends up moving to Israel and becoming much less religious, though her religion is still very important to her. I always found that really interesting too, that all of the characters were finding their own way for their religion to be meaningful to them. And that it wasn't necessarily that there is one path always to how to have a meaningful relationship with God or how to have a meaningful relationship with your religious traditions, and that you can do it in so many different ways, and that's fine. And it doesn't make you any less of a Jewish person. It doesn't make you any less of a Catholic person. Like, you can have your own relationship with God and your own relationship with religion. And if that's meaningful to you, then it's meaningful. And I think there's something really beautiful and reassuring about that.
Yeah. And how have you found your way as an adult in your relationship to religion and Judaism?
It's been interesting because I feel like probably in like high schoolish, I thought, and middle schoolish too, I guess maybe like right around bat mitzvah era, and then right after that, I was much more involved in my synagogue and my youth group, and being Jewish was a big part of my life, like just my daily life. And then going to college and afterward, it sort of fell away a bit. And I still celebrated holidays, and I still, appreciated culture and read all of the books and everything. But it wasn't really until I got married and had a daughter, she's a little over 4, that I began really thinking like, oh, this is actually something I want to pass on to her as important. Like, I want her to know that she's Jewish. I want her to know that these are the prayers and these are the songs that Jewish people have been reciting for millennia. And I want her to know these holidays and these stories. And my mom signed her up for PJ Library, which is awesome. And she's been getting all of these books about Jewish holidays and Jewish traditions it's been really special to me. And I'm really glad to sort of come back to it and to know that all of the knowledge and all of the love and all of the sort of I don't know, the place in my heart where Judaism has lived is still there. And it just kind of is taking up a little more space now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can shifts over time.
Yeah.
I had read an interview with you where you mentioned that your father, before the end of his life, had converted to Judaism.
He did.
I was curious about that.
Yeah, so his whole adult life, after he married my mom, my dad belonged to the synagogue. He ran some of the events for the couples club and all of that. Like he was really into it. And when my sisters and I had our bat mitzvahs, the rabbi said to him, it was a very Reformed congregation, and they were like, do you want to come up and say prayers? Do you want a Hebrew name? Like, what do you want to do? And he was like, I love a Hebrew name. Like, yes, I'll learn the prayers. And I think he very much just enjoyed being part of what our family was doing. At some point, I think we'd all gone to college, and the synagogue was offering adult bar and bat mitzvah classes. And my mom had never had a bat mitzvah as a kid. I think it just wasn't something that people did very often. And she was like, I want to have a bat mitzvah. And my dad was like, I want to have a bar mitzvah. And the rabbi was like, well, that's very nice, John, but you have to be Jewish first. So he decided to go through conversion classes and officially become Jewish, even though he sort of had been acting as a Jewish man for like 20 years or whatever. And then my parents had a joint bar and bat mitzvah, which was so much fun and just like a great moment for our family.
That's so sweet. How old were they when they had their bar and bat mitzvahs?
My mom was maybe in her like mid 50s. My dad was maybe 60. Like they were definitely older when they did it, and they threw themselves a big party, and everybody was dancing, and it was a lot of fun.
Book 3, A Book That Changed Your Worldview, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew, by Emmanuel Acho and Noah Tishby.
There was so much in it that they talked about the sort of history of anti-Semitism, that you can make kind of a straight line from things that happened so many years ago to things that are happening today or things people say today. And I think just having that understanding as a base really shifted how I thought about the reactions that people are having in the anti-Semitic events that have been happening currently, knowing like, oh, actually, this is where that's coming from. This is how that sort of filtered into the, societal environment and how it's kind of being transformed into today. And like one of the things they were talking about was the sort of idea of Jewish people running Hollywood. And then Noah was talking about how there were actually a lot of Jewish people in entertainment in the US because they weren't allowed to do other things. And they were, cut off from these other kinds of jobs. So this was what they did. And then that's sort of how that then filters into Jewish people run Hollywood trope. And then at the same time, there's the idea of the cabal of Jewish people are running the world, which also runs, ties into the Hollywood thing, and it kind of comes to a head. And I just thought that wasn't anything I had really studied before or thought about very deeply before. And the book really just pointed out or made a number of connections that I was like, that really shifts how I'm thinking about what I've been seeing in the news. Mm-hmm. The concept of blood libel has sort of shifted through the ages and become now the real sort of focus on how Jewish people want other people dead. There's this idea of blood libel that goes through the ages. And that I thought was really, really powerful.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things I found so powerful about it is just that it's structured as a dialogue. And just given the polarized times we're living in, even if you sort of don't agree with the particulars that are being put forth in the book, just the idea of engaging in dialogue, even when it's difficult, I found to be really profound.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so important always, but particularly now when you can be in your own bubble and you can hear all of the things that you think reinforced a million times, and you can mute or block or unfollow anyone who has a different thought than you do. The fact that people are willing to engage in conversations and also come away with like, okay, maybe we don't agree about this. And that's okay too. But I see where you're coming from, and I hope you can see where I'm coming from. And even if we don't get to the same place, we can at least understand. And I think that's really important. And I think that that book does that really beautifully, because there are moments where Emmanuel Acho and Noah Tishby don't actually agree. And he says, like, essentially, like, I see where you're coming from, but this is where I'm coming from. And, like, this is why I feel this way, and I understand why you feel this way.
What a better world we'd be living in if everyone could have these conversations.
Book 4, the book you're reading now, The Stolen Queen by Fiona Davis.
I am reading The Stolen Queen by Fiona Davis, which is wonderful. It's also historical fiction. I guess we're sort of vibing with that in this interview.
Yeah.
It's really fun and it's really well crafted, and there are a whole bunch of mystery aspects to it that I like truly did not figure out until I got to the end of the book. So it was great. I just finished it like, I want to say like 3 days ago.
Book 5, the author's latest book, The Love We Found by Jill Santopolo.
So The Light We Lost was the first book in this duology that is now a duology that came out about 8 years ago. And it's the story of Lucy and Gabe, who meet on September 11th, 2001 at Columbia University. And then it follows them for the next 13 years as they kind of move in and out of each other's lives, and who they are to each other and what they mean to each other kind of shifts and changes based on circumstances. And then The Love We Found starts 10 years after The Light We Lost leaves off. And Lucy essentially has to deal with the aftermath of what happened in The Light We Lost and figure out whether secrets she's been keeping for 10 years should be shared, whether she will ever be able to move on, whether she will ever be able to find someone who means as much to her as Gabe meant to her.
It's such a beautiful story, and really is framed around this question about free will and fate. And that all kind of kicks off with September 11th, which you alluded to earlier. So I'm wondering what the resonance of September 11th was for you.
So I was in college at Columbia University on September 11th, 2001. And I felt like for me and for a lot of my friends who were there that day, it made us really realize that life is finite and you never know how much time you're going to get. You never know what's going to happen. And that if there's something you want to do, you should go after it. And if there's something you want to be remembered for, you should try and make that thing happen. And I think that that sort of reevaluation and recognition of the limits of life.
Did it change something for you personally? Like, were you on one path and heading down another?
I think it really just secured in me the fact that I wanted to make books and I wanted to work in children's books and create stories that could help shape the future in a way that felt good to me, empowering to me.
So tell me a little bit more about that. What draws you to children's literature? And what draws you to the books that you choose to publish specifically?
So what draws me in general to children's literature is two things. One is I really feel like if you can get kids to love books when they're young, you kind of give them this gift for a lifetime, because they will always be able to find solace in stories and it will always be meaningful to them to read. And I also feel like kids are so malleable and open, and if you can expose them to the ideas of their own power, their own ability to change the world, that they can question the status quo, they can admire other people who are different than they are, and just the idea that we can all be proud of who we are and at the same time be accepting and respectful of people who are different. And that if you can sort of get stories that showcase all of those things out into the world, it has the potential to open up the next generation of readers to a world that feels kinder and more empowering than the one we are in right now.
Yeah, I have 4 kids, and reading with them and to them is just such a profound experience as a parent, I think, and what you're giving to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to go back to what you were talking about earlier in our conversation about sort of framing your books with these real life events. So we talked about a pivotal event happening during the Israel-Gaza war of summer of 2014. And this book also is framed around the Syrian refugee crisis, influx of Syrian refugees. So what made you want to sort of highlight that moment as well?
So, I think the Syrian refugee crisis was at the time in 2013, 2014, which is when that part of the story sort of happened, was something that was getting a lot of attention in the media and would have been something that Gabe covered. So that was sort of, in part, I was looking at things like what would he have been doing in that moment in time? But also, the attitude toward refugees and immigrants right now is not necessarily one that I agree with. And I wanted to sort of shine a light on refugees and immigration and migration and why people leave. And there's a poem that I quote, or that Lucy quotes, I guess, in The Lovely Found by Warsan Shire, I think is how you say the last name, that, paraphrasing, says, "You don't put your family in a boat unless the boat is safer than land." I think that one of the things that was important to me to show in this book was that if you are leaving a country, if you are becoming a refugee, this isn't something you would choose to do. This is because you need to do this. This is because your family is not safe and you are not safe. And if this were your family, if your family needed to leave where they lived because they were not safe, you would want other people in other countries to embrace them. And I think that that's something that I try to say without saying it by featuring Syrian refugees in The Love We Found.
Yeah, and also having Gabe, the character, his own work. There's such a beautiful layered way of calling attention to it in a way that was fully, integrated into the story. I really appreciated that. And I also want to just note the other refugee in the story is Eva, who's an older woman who's friends with Lucy, and you give her a background of being a Holocaust survivor. So I wondered about that.
Yeah, that was something in Stars in Italian Sky and in this book. I wanted there to be stories of Jewish people during World War II where it's just part of life. It's just part of who they are. There are people still walking around who had these experiences, and their life isn't about these experiences. Eva is an artist. She's a wonderful friend. She is a romantic. She's lived this full life. But this is who she is. This was her experience. And I wanted to weave a world that felt like my real life world, where Holocaust survivors are our neighbors and are our friends and are real. I think that a lot of the information I see about how many people think the Holocaust didn't happen is horrifying to me. So if I can put the story of a Holocaust survivor as part of the fabric of one of my novels, I want to do that, just as a sort of affirmation that, like, this happened. These people are real.
I wondered about the idea, I think it's the character's Dax, who we get to know in The Love We Found, who's a doctor and working with the refugees. He talks about pain being purposeful, and he has his own pain in his personal story. I wondered about that idea that pain is purposeful.
I think what I'd been thinking about then is that, I mean, pain is pain, but you can take your pain and make it purposeful, or make it feel purposeful at least, so that, you know, I think Eva says she takes her pain and turns it into art. He sort of takes his pain and feels that if it means he can be a better doctor, then there was a purpose to it, and gives meaning to something that might otherwise just be awful.
I guess I wonder, having spent so much time with these characters over the course of, I don't know when you started writing The Light We Lost, but it's been, probably a decade of your life.
Yeah, for sure.
What is it about them that you feel like has so connected with readers? I mean, this book is translated into 35 different languages and millions of readers. What is it about them?
I don't know. I mean, if I knew, I would replicate it with every book I wrote. I know that there's a level of intimacy in the stories because Lucy is talking to Gabe in both books. And I think that gives an additional layer of vulnerability and honesty that maybe is something that people can connect with. I mean, I think when you meet someone and you have a really honest, vulnerable, intimate conversation with them, you feel some kind of connection, and maybe that is sort of being replicated here because of the style. I don't really know, though.
That's so interesting, because you use that kind of device in some other of your books, like in everything after the narrator is addressing something to it. It's a diary, but she's writing to a particular character. So what is it about that structure that you like doing?
I mean, I think part of it is that it limits how you tell the story, because for The Love We Found, I had been thinking, well, does Lucy talk to Gabe again, or is she talking to someone else? Is she talking to a child, or is she talking to a friend or whatever? And I realized she would focus on different things if she was telling the story to a child, one of her children. She would focus on different things if she was telling the story to a friend. And that there is something really, focusing, I guess, on saying she's telling the story to this particular person that she has this particular relationship with, that is a very intimate relationship in very specific ways. And so here's what she would share, and here's how she would share it, and here's what she wouldn't share. And like that gets left out of the story. So it kind of gives me a clear mandate of what I should be including. Mm-hmm. So that I find interesting. And I also just find it interesting writing with that level of intimacy. I started writing that way for The Light We Lost because I had gone through a breakup, and I kept thinking, like, for weeks later, that there were things I would see and I would think, oh, I have to tell him about this. Oh, he would really love this. Oh, I wonder what he would think about this. And there was this realization that this man that I'd been with for 3 years had sort of infiltrated my inner monologue, and that there was something so intimate about that. And I wanted to sort of capture that feeling of being so connected to someone that they have infiltrated your inner monologue and become your inner monologue. And for these books, it's not exactly what happens, but it's sort of that feeling.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, I think that is what connected me as a reader, was just you feel so much a part of their story and so much a part of their connection. It's really beautiful. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us today. I hope people will, if they haven't yet read The Love We Found, I hope they'll find it. And it's just a beautiful story, again, of life and fate and choices and all of those things. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such a wonderful podcast. And actually, apropos of nothing, not knowing that I was about to come on this podcast, a friend of mine recommended the podcast to me 3 days ago.
I'm so honored. That's amazing.
Yeah. I was like, hey, I'm going on that.
Oh, that's so great. I love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you so much for joining us today for the 5 books. If you enjoyed this show, please recommend it to friends and family. You can even send them your favorite episode. Our guest today was Jill Santopolo talking about her novel, The Love We Found. You can find a link to the book and all the others Jill discussed in our show notes. You can find transcripts and more at www.5bookspod.org. You can also find us on Instagram at 5bookspod or on Facebook, The 5 Books Podcast. If you have feedback for us or an author recommendation, send us an email at team@5bookspod.org. I'm Tali Rosenblatt-Cohen. Our producer is Odelia Rubin. Editorial and website support from Sarah Waring. Music by Dove Rosenblatt and Blue Dot Sessions. Art by Dina Friedman. Thanks especially to the Jewish Book Council.